Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. I am excited. We got the first time guest, Evan, on top. We got Corey rejoining us because it's been way too long. And Shaun, as always, hanging out in the mountains. I love this. While I'm excited, I'm going to forget what I need to do. So you should be doing it for me. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays for The Gold Mine and Fridays for The Collective. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit those throughout the show. And without further ado, let's get some intros and get right into the combo. Evan, I'm going to hit you first. 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All the good stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Chase. Thanks for having me. Evan Stewart. I'm a Chief Fire Officer with an Urban Fire and EMS service in Alberta. Canadian Forces veteran as well. Father of two boys. Husband to a beautiful wife. Also work with Canada Task Force 2, one of the urban search and rescue teams in Canada. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Bam. I like it. Corey, how about yourself?
Hey, Corey McGregor, 18 years law enforcement, father of two young girls, also, strangely enough, a husband to a beautiful wife, podcaster, and sometimes guest on the Collective in the Gold Mine.
Bam. Love it. Shaun, how's Mountain treating you?
What a coincidence. I have a wife and children as well, and I love them.
Odd. 4 guys in the same room all have wonderful families. This is going to be good. Now, we are going to be talking about the way we communicate. And right off the bat, I'm going to hit us up with an example of, let's say, poor communication. And then we're going to go from there. So let's dive in. Here we go.
Times make strong men. Strong men make easy times. Easy times make soft men. Soft men make hard times that are hard. Hard times make strong men that are soft sometimes. Hard men make easier times than the times that came before. The hard men were hard. Easy times make soft men that are super soft. Soft men that are made by the easy times. Soft men make me hard during the times that are easy. When times get easier times make for stronger, softer men. When the easy times get hard, I get hard for soft men. When times get, sometimes, I killed this animal. Sometimes whenever there's a man that's hard, it makes me soft during a hard time. Sometimes men get so soft, make the times that are hard man. Hard times make men, when times are easy, I'm always hard for soft men. What?
Bam. So the reason I picked this one, as you can probably imagine, is the fact that buzzwords and just words that are out on the internet right now that are quick and easy are not always effective. So what are you guys' first thoughts? Evan, I'm going to come to you. What do you think?
Verbal fluency. I think a huge part of communication, effective communication, is verbal fluency, which means like a lack of hesitation. It means precise terminology. And a diverse vocabulary. And I think a lot of people lack the ability to think independently when it comes to communicating. So they latch on to these buzzwords. They latch on to these, hot topics of the week, something they've watched on their Instagram reel, something they've watched on Facebook. And this is a prime example of somebody trying to reenact that, I think.
100%. Corey, thoughts?
Yeah, probably a little less succinct than Evan, but I think it's a situation where we want to say something, we have an idea, and we just end up trying to prove it to ourselves as we're talking to somebody. So all we're doing is just verbal diarrhea. All we're doing is continuing to talk until we think we sound intelligent enough on whatever point it is that really didn't require that much time or words to say.
I'm like where this is going, Shaun. Thoughts?
This is an easy one for me. It's almost like you lobbed me something that I get to crack out of the park, because I just wrote about it the other day. And basically I titled it or referenced the parrot perch. So you've got the rabbit hole and the parrot perch. Anyone who's in the game of life, who's trying to become better, seek more, understand the bigger world around them that they haven't maybe had a chance to experience. If you scrabble down the rabbit hole to try to find out more about everything around you, that is way different than the parrot perch. The parrot perch is in proximity to the rabbit hole. That's where all the parrots gather, squawking and mimicking and mirroring each other squawking, and it's squawking after squawking after squawking, and it's really just to get attention from other parrots. But nothing is being said other than the same squawk. And as I stated in my Instagram post, you'll never see a parrot fly down a rabbit hole, and you'll never see a rabbit on a parrot perch. And there's a reason for that. Because I believe that in order to go down the rabbit hole, you've got to have independence of thought. You've got to have faith in yourself, or at least the conviction to adventure in a way that is unique in society right now. A lot of people find it easy to use poor language and mirroring language to make a point that they didn't understand before they started talking, and they understand less as they're talking. And so it is a jumble of words out there right now that people are just simply picking up, throwing together in a poor recipe, and repeating it on endless stream.
I am in total agreement with that. I just want to hit on this comment real quick. Satch joined us. Good morning, team. And I don't have a wife. Evan, any thoughts on that? On what Shaun just hit us with?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Shaun on the fact that you've got two different styles of people out there: people that are capable of independent thought and those that may not be. I think to touch on a previous episode you guys had on fear versus anxiety, basically, right? When people are anxious to situations, or when they're I won't say fearful, because it's probably not true fear, but I find they tend to gravitate to the common theme of the day. They try and find a group to fit into, and whatever that group's saying, regardless of whether they truly even understand what the comment is being said, they tend to pick up those terminologies, those one-liners, even by osmosis, right? So it's almost like the follower versus leader syndrome, I think, in that regard. And I agree, it's really hard to get a rabbit to sit on a perch, because you're not on the same wavelength, right?
100%. I think also just the anatomy is different, really. When you think about it. Corey, got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, I think it's important as well to examine the fact that in this day and age, we always seem to have an opinion on no matter what is being said. And having an opinion isn't the same as having an experience or knowledge of it. You can have knowledge and experience on something and not have an opinion on something because you don't know enough. And we don't often say that. We don't often say, I have no opinion on that, because we want to be involved, or we feel that we need to be involved. And by we, I mean just the collective people on this planet. And I think if we stopped thinking we needed to have an opinion on everything, perhaps maybe we would communicate a little bit better, because we're not constantly filling that void with just nonsense.
Just fill in the air for the sake of filling the air. John Menard jumped in here, said morning all. Good to see you, John. Now, I think that perhaps it's kind of like the game of telephone, right? The point gets lost in the transfer, at least. And in my mind, it seems almost like, making a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. You're going to lose pieces of it every single time. And it's slowly going to degrade to a point of uselessness, at least in my mind. Shaun, what are you thinking?
Well, I think that, in a general sort of reference, you're right. But I just want to get kind of in front of what you just said and make it clear what I believe is happening. I'm no different than anyone else. I want to participate. I want to be part of something. And so when folks are talking about whatever, I want to talk with them. I want to be part of a conversation, irrespective of what the conversation is. And so I think where it goes wrong for me, and where it goes wrong for everyone, is when the conversation starts, you don't understand the conversation, but you feel compelled to engage in the conversation and throw in your 2 cents. The 2 cents that isn't well thought out. And so the general compulsion is to start talking before thinking. And I feel that everyone can participate in all conversations, but that doesn't mean that you've got to have the conversation out loud. First of all, you should have the conversation with yourself. And so no matter what the subject is, just like we're talking right now, rather than just throwing out my 2 cents every single paragraph, I'm trying to have the conversation with myself before I have the conversation with the world. It requires that liminal space. It requires that tactical pause. It requires the moment where you don't talk and just simply think before you talk. And that is missing out there right now. And maybe one of the reasons, I'm curious if you guys have got any opinion on it, it's because some people feel like they have to be the first to the gate. They have to be the first with the opinion. They have to be the first into the mix. They have to throw their 2 cents in, and it's the first 2 cents in the pile. And it's not often a well thought out 2 cents.
That is a fantastic point. Corey, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and obviously I understand the irony of us going back and forth and throwing our 2 cents in every time, but yeah, I really that resonates with me, especially when you have a conversation with somebody and, like Shaun said, they happen to be the first person to throw their 2 cents in, and you might have a dissenting opinion on that or a different opinion on that, and you'll see that person go, oh well, yeah, that's not exactly what I meant, and they start to tailor it a little bit more to what your opinion is. And it's like, well, wait a minute, didn't you have an opinion and now your opinion is mine? So obviously that wasn't your opinion if you're willing to give it up so easily simply because I had a different one.
I'm liking where this is going. Evan, thoughts?
Yeah, I want to hit on 2 things that I heard, one from Shaun and one from Corey. One from Shaun as being, the first to add their 2 cents. And then the part from Corey about somebody giving you their opinion quickly, simply because it was just different from yours. And, this is a place where I've personally failed at communicating, and I've learned the lesson probably the hard way. But, when you talk about communicating, it's a 2-way street, whether it's conversational, whether it's, just imparting or exchanging information with somebody. Active listening is huge, right? That second piece of communicating what the receiver is receiving. A lot of people, including myself, I've caught myself do that, listen with the intent to respond, and instead of the intent to understand what's being said. And I think that when you listen with the intent to respond, you're literally disregarding what that person's saying, because you've already formulated your thoughts and your responses in your brain before they've even completed their exchange of information to you. When you listen to understand, you're truly silent and you're maybe not opinionated on what they're saying, and you take in what they're talking about and maybe try and see it from their perspective, you might actually have a more intelligent response and may actually be able to engage in conversation better with that individual because you can ask the right questions, right? And like I said, I've learned that the hard way. I've stepped into situations where I'm not listening to what they're saying, and I've caught myself like, I already know what I'm going to respond, and they're not even done talking yet. You need to back this up and ask them to say what they said again.
I've fallen into a similar trap, especially responding to things that I didn't hear the whole conversation. You hear a small portion of it, and then you jump into it like, aha, I know how to fix that. And you didn't listen to the whole conversation. I've run into that many times. So my question then is, how do we get better? What do we do in the moments where our opinion snaps in like, oh, how do we rein it in? How do you rein it in? Let's put it that way. Corey, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
I think if your opinion is valid, not blurting it out right at the beginning is not going to be any worse than saying it later on, because it's still valid. It's still well thought out. If you have to feel like you have to kick it across the line first so that nobody has a chance to disprove it prior to you being able to change it, I think that it's probably not that valid.
Bam. Evan, thoughts?
Yeah. I think like many things in life, communicating, I don't think is something that everybody is born with skills with. Like it's your imparted knowledge from your parents, from your life experience. And I think as long as you're somebody that's willing to fail and learn from your mistakes and move forward, you're gonna find ways that work for you on how to be a better communicator. it's simply something that's learned. It's not something that you're born with. So my opinion is trying to self reflect when conversations go poorly or communications go poorly. Self-reflect on why, and figure out what part you own in that failure of communication, and work on those pieces as an individual. Right?
Absolutely, Shaun. Any thoughts?
Yeah, two. I think we've got two responsibilities. We've got an internal responsibility and an external responsibility. I've spoken about it a little bit in podcasts in the past. That when I'm in the podcast nowadays, I just try to exist. I try not to think. I try to let the words come in and they flow through me, hang out wherever they hang out. I don't even know. Maybe they pass right through me. Who cares? And then when it's my turn to talk, I just simply exist and let it flow. So I'm trying to let it flow in. I'm trying to let it flow out. And I try not to stick to a word. I try not to stick to a thought. I just try to let it unfold. So the hour that we're here is just unfolding for me. I'm trying not to manipulate it. I'm just trying to let it be. But that's really difficult. And it's taken me a long time to even get kind of okay at it, because I was atrocious at it when I first started podcasting. Someone would be half a sentence into the first portion of the podcast, and I'd already have the entire podcast figured out in my head, because that's the way my brain works. But that's not the right sort of thinking. And so that is me running a podcast in my head. That's just Shaun podcasting, not with friends or colleagues or peers or wiser people than Shaun. It was just Shaun running Shaun's little Shaun program. And it's taken me hundreds of these kind of things to get better at simply just existing and letting it unfold. It is hard work. It really is. It is work that requires effort and focus and discipline to do it better every single time. It will not show up on a silver platter. It will not appear magically in front of anyone. It is work, literally home work, as I'm at my home. So I think first and foremost, communication should never be considered as, oh, you've either got it or you don't. If you've got it, you earned it. So you either earned it or you didn't earn it as a good communicator. So that's my first thought. It's our responsibility internally to get better at this game. My second point is the external world. We also have a responsibility there. And I might be a bit notorious for it, but I will course correct anyone in a split second if I think they're not calibrated properly in the moment. And I don't know why I am that way. I don't know why I don't have a whole lot of resistance to simply just saying what's on my mind externally sometimes. But that's me. I should probably get better at it. I don't know, or reel it back in, but it has been my way for a long time. My point is this. Yesterday, I was on a single track on my mountain bike, and it was a steep hill that I was climbing up and a very narrow single track. On my right side, I had a very tall embankment. On my left side, I had a very steep drop off. And I saw a guy ripping down the single track towards me at warp factor 3, but he had his head lined up with his front wheel. He didn't know anything beyond 10 feet of his front tire. He was just barreling down, totally situationally unaware. So I pulled over and got out of the way, hoping that he would see me, but he didn't. So about 20 feet away, I called up, hey, heads up. And he looked up, panicked, locked up his brakes, and then tried to get around me. But it was impossible to get around me because of the amount of trail that we had to play with. There wasn't enough for him to get around. And when he locked up and realized he couldn't get around, he was angry. And right away, what he did, his default response was this. He turned and looked at me, super flared out, super aggressive, and started off with an opening sentence of, hey, what you? And then, as he was yelling, he looked me in the eye. And then he did a scan and looked on my t-shirt, and I was wearing an Operation Pegasus Jump t-shirt, which, kind of looks a little bit like this. So it's not bears in the woods sharing honey jars. It sort of represents something, if you will. And then I watched his eyes scan to my left bicep. Well, it's not a howitzer, But that day, yesterday, it was looking pretty juicy. So he went from eyeballs to not honey jars to the howitzer. And that happened in about 0.25 seconds, that scan. Now I know that because, like all of us on this panel, we've all been taught when moments like this happen, I call it, I slip into operator mode. But what we all do is we start time slicing and observing body structure, body posture, body intent, the energy someone is giving off. All of the nonverbal cues are all forms of communication. And as he was observing me, he started to deconflict because all I did was, as I hung onto my handlebars, was do this. I just sat up a little bit taller and projected out some force in his general direction with that look of, you said what? And as I looked at him that way, I simply said, sorry, I didn't hear what you just said. What was that again? And he said, oh, yeah, sorry about that, blah, 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 and super apologetic. And the moment was over and off he went. I said, have a good day. But it's our job in those moments to shift the fate of humanity, if you will, for that individual. His default response was in place because he's always got away with his shtick. His general response was, when I'm in the wrong, I just flip everyone the double birds and flare out. Well, that works for some people, but it didn't work for him yesterday. And he got a course correction in the moment. It wasn't like anything bad happened. It was a moment for him to think, whoa, I'm not going to get away with this time. And I do believe that that is part of our responsibilities as humans. If something is going astray out there, we can't just think internally, what a goof. We've got to let the other individual know through some form of either nonverbal communication or verbal communication that what's happening is not cool and you need to adjust your ways.
I could not agree more. And I have a video basically on that, but I want to get some thoughts on this first. Evan, I'm going to hit you first. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, Shaun touched on so many things, and like you said, conversation flowing through, you just taking it as it comes. I'm thinking about all these things that I could say and caught on to what he was exactly saying. Just let it flow and have a conversation. But so much of communication is not verbal. Actually, more of communication is nonverbal than it is the actual words that are coming out of somebody's mouth. But even the verbal words that are coming out of your mouth, like the difference in tone, inflection, volume, means so many things when you're communicating with somebody. The nonverbal cues like body posture, body language, gestures, even when somebody's scanning you or you're scanning somebody else, just their physiology, their physical makeup is going to change how you're going to communicate them. I communicate differently to my children than I do to one of my fire officers or one of the firefighters I work with every day. I communicate differently when I'm in a high stress situation. I communicate differently when I'm in a low stress situation. And we all know on this call, right? Like a lot of us are wired to function well in high stress situation when it comes to communicating, where it's got to be clear, it's got to be concise, it's got to be coherent, it's got to be complete. And sometimes we miss adding, when it's in a non-stress situation, we miss adding the courteous or the mindful piece of communicating, right? So I have a default mode too. I'm really good at, on an emergency scene of giving clear, concise, complete, coherent orders on the radio so that everybody has good situational awareness and knows what's going on. Trying to use my tone of voice and my inflection to make sure that I sound like I'm calm and I'm cool, I'm in control, at least, even if I'm not, at least I sound like it right over the radio. When I go home, sometimes I catch myself trying to communicate the same way to my kids and my wife, and it doesn't work for them, right? And rightfully so. And I need to be adaptable in the way I communicate based on the situation. And that, I think, is part of that understanding and that obligation we have of understanding our environment and how we choose to communicate in that environment, right?
That's a great point. I mean, I went through multiple comm schools, and it was always about maintaining good, clear, concise communication. Hit them with exactly what they need to know in a very cool, calm, collected voice, and you're good to go. If you start to get anxious on the radio, everyone starts to get anxious. I'm sure we've all heard it too. Corey, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, a lot of very fantastic stuff that I'm trying to keep track of, but trying to also be spontaneous at the same time. To touch base on what some of what Evan was saying about taking personal responsibility for how you're communicating with somebody, and what Shaun was saying with the internal and external communication. One of the things I want to touch on, because I don't think I'm going to say it better than what Evan just said, is to think when you're communicating with somebody, are you responding to them or are you responding to the incident that you guys are currently talking about? And what I say about that is we find that with a lot of our new recruits. They'll show up at scene, it's highly charged, but it's under control, but they respond to somebody and they amp that up. The scene itself, the incident itself, we can deal with, but the person or persons that they're dealing with are amped. So they're bringing it up, their shoulders are coming up, all that nonverbal communication is coming out. And all of a sudden, it's a much more dynamic situation than it needs to be. And you have to ask yourself, think about it this way in a common everyday. Your wife comes up and explains something that you didn't do properly. Are you responding to the situation or are you responding to your wife? Because your wife has already said this 50 times before, and now you're already, oh yeah, really? Or, yeah, no, you're right. I didn't do the dishes. I'll get on those right away. Are you dealing with the incident? Or are you dealing with the person? And how are you communicating that?
That is a beautiful point. That is my lesson I'm still working on. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
Well, it is an important lesson. And by the way, it's not one that anyone is really taught as a young person. In my 60s now, I'm still digging deeper into the awareness of how much power we all have with our energy. I was never told that when I was a kid, and I was never told it in the military. But my first career being the military, I was learning how to wield my energy. I just didn't know that that's what I was doing. It's a process to me back then because it wasn't a conversation. It was an organic evolution of how to stand, how to fold your arms, how to put your hands on your hips, how to blade as your posture, how to square up your shoulders, how to put your chin up or chin down. All of these little things, all of these body or nonverbal cues, how you looked at someone, if you squinted at them, if you gave them the stink eye, if you gave them the nod, all of the things that I learned back in the day, I didn't understand how powerful they were and still are because no one told me that when I show up to X, Y, and Z, I can project my energy out into that moment and shape it. I didn't understand that we all have, every human has the ability to wield an energy in the moment that can be for good or for bad. And so, as Evan stated, and Corey stated, with newer newer personnel, they don't understand these things yet. They don't understand how they can ramp up a situation way beyond what it should have been for no good reason other than they have never been told that you don't have to say anything. You don't have to touch anything. You just have to show up. And you could screw it up if you don't get a grip on your energy, what you're projecting out that you may not be aware of, almost like that invisible vibe, we'll call it. So I do believe that in all recruit schools, anyone who's on front line, it almost needs to be, and it shouldn't be all unicorns and rainbows, but it almost needs to be a energy awareness course or an energy awareness presentation where humans that we all know it's reality, humans just have to show up and project whatever they project, and they can turn it so off base or so on point just simply by being. No talking, no looking, no touching, just being can control chaos or create chaos.
This is a fantastic point. I think it does get taught in the military, it just doesn't get explained in the military because I remember, and I mean, I did this once, but I also remember having it happen to me when I was learning drill. But I had to take a group of young officers and teach them command presence. And there is a command presence when you're calling drill, how you stand, how you hold yourself, how you eloquate. All those things are important to the actual drill setting. Because if you're lackluster in command, the people on the drill square are going to be lackluster in their movements. And I think that it's just not explained well, at least in my mind. Now I have another video here. I just want to see if any other thoughts on anything so far. Evan, you got any other thoughts on this?
The only last thing I wanted to add to that, because I think it fits right in tail into what Shaun was talking about, is when and how you choose to communicate is the next step. Your energy, I 100% agree, is step one. Step two is we've all been in conversations where you got to have a difficult conversation with somebody. And if you choose to do that in front of that person's peers, in front of that person's subordinates, their family, people they care about, you automatically, the hair stands up on the back of their neck. Like you almost trigger that fight, flight, or freeze response in them because you're calling them out in front of people. And it's the same thing. They're no longer listening to what you have to say, right? You've backed them into a corner and they're either going to fight out of it in the conversation, or they're just not going to engage. They're not listening, or they're going to run away from that conversation. And I find people that have the emotional intelligence to understand that in conversations, be like, you know what, that person, I need to say something to this individual, but I'm going to wait 5 minutes and I'm going to get them one-on-one. And if you can have that conversation with them and take that guard down in that individual, they might actually listen to what you have to say at that point, and you might actually be able to convey your point across to them, because there's no point in communicating to them when they're not receiving what you're sending, right?
100%. Corey, you got any additional thoughts to this?
Yeah, just a little bit. Commonality in communication is so important. And to touch base on what Evan is talking about, I often have to have uncomfortable conversations at my work with peers and things like that. If you can come up with a commonality, if you can start off with, this was the time that I screwed up about something that we're about to talk about. This is what happened. This is the difficulties I was having. This is how I got over it. And then sort of move into that. I see that in you. And this is sort of something that we need to address. I think it's something we can fully deal with. I was able to. You're going to be able to. I think that finding it, they say common ground, but it's not common ground. It's a commonality. It's something that they see a point, counterpoint in you, and understand where you're coming from just by you telling them that story without them even having to say a word.
And you're focusing on yourself rather than focusing on them, which I think is beautiful. Absolutely. Shaun, you got any last points on this before we move on to the next one?
Do, and I'll make them brief because the fellas, they hit it. So just to play devil's advocate, because you do know one of my jobs over here is to stir the pot. So the other side of the coin is sometimes you have to do it in front of someone's peers. And I mean, that could be an entire podcast. So I don't want everyone to think over here we're all kumbaya, because we're not. Sometimes it's got to be a freaking Thor's hammer upside the head in front of your peers. It just has to be sometimes. Now that is fraught with danger. That is a situation that should never be done first timer by someone who hasn't been in the game a long time and doesn't understand how the game's played. If you think that you can jack up your peers in front of your peers just anytime you want, just because you've never tried it before, that is not the approach. That approach should only be reserved for sometimes almost randomized, but infrequent moments where the needle has to be moved in a way that it isn't being moved in a way off to the side quietly. But I'm not going to say it's perilous, but what it is it's dangerous territory that you have to step through carefully. And you can't step through it with an end state in mind, like you've got your plan to move through the minefield of the conversation in front of peers. What you've got to do is move through it delicately in real time and be sensitive to what's going on in the real time so that you can modulate your message in real time. And if things play out in a way that is positive, then good. And if they play out in a negative fashion, which is a possibility, that's your job now to learn from that and then be more cautious next time you step into the verbal minefield. And let's make no bones about it. Communication is as simple or highly complex and nuanced as you wish. If your grasp of the English language or whatever language you speak is small, if you don't have much bandwidth, then your game is different than someone who has an extremely large vocabulary and wields it in a way that is impressive. I love being around people who communicate well. But when they're communicating well, it's because they've got so many tools in their communication toolbox that they can go from here to here and here to here in a split second across a large verbal battle space that they have been controlling for a long time. So, to my point again, there is a flip side to the coin.
As there is with most things. I love that. Speaking of which, I want to take us back to a point that you had made earlier, Shaun. You talked about sometimes you just, you have this desire to correct people, and or not so correct people, but when you see something wrong, you want to correct it. And so with that, the concept of, people will say, "Oh, I don't have a filter, man. I'll do whatever. I just tell it like it is." And we're going to touch on that right now. Here we go.
Opinion, nobody who says they tell it like it is actually tells it like it is. Everyone who says they're blunt or brutally honest or unfiltered is lying, and what they're doing is making an excuse for being an asshole. And here is the proof. They never over-compliment stuff. They only tell it like it is when what they think it is bad and not their fault. If you actually had no filter and didn't observe social cues and always said the thing that was on your mind, at least once, you would be fawning. "I'm sorry, bro, I just gotta tell you the truth. Your hair looks stunning today." A person who is truly unfiltered would say all kinds of nice things as non sequiturs. They would be like, "Your hair looks great, the sky is bad, that plant is beautiful, that bird is annoying. We didn't need a remake of The Talented Mr. Ripley, but the art direction of the Netflix version definitely makes it worth it. And that hot priest is still super hot, even when he's being a dumb murderer." Or they'd be hard on themselves the way they're hard on other people. A truly blunt person would be like, "I showed up late because I don't actually respect your time. I gotta be brutally honest here, I dress like shit and I could really use therapy, but I'm afraid of what I'll learn." If everything you say is negative about other people, you have a very strong filter. It's just filtering out the stuff worth hearing.
Bam. Let's get some thoughts on that. Evan, I'm going to hit you first. What do you think?
I agree with some of what was said, and I disagree with some of it too. I definitely agree that a lot of people that say they tell it like it is are giving an opinion, and they're maybe not telling it like it is. They're just giving an opinion. So they're telling it like it is in their head. They may not be telling like it is in reality. So maybe they're lacking some situational awareness. Their perception of reality is a little bit disjointed from what reality actually is. But I think there are a lot of people that tell it like it is, in the sense that they are transparent communicators. They're honest, and they are the flip side of the coin when they need to be. They'll course correct people in situations where course correction needs to happen. We have that in the fire service, right? We have life and death situations where there's no time for the pleasantries of courteous communication. We just need to get a point across, and everybody needs to know it right now, because if they don't, they're missing something critical, and it can be somebody's life and livelihood, right? It's all about the situation, in my opinion. It's all about understanding, what the message is you're trying to get across, who's receiving it, how that person receives it. Shaun talked about, those people that are excellent at verbal judo, and they can meet anybody at their level, regardless of the conversation, because they have a good vocabulary. They're very articulate. I think that this individual in this video is talking, in my opinion, about a certain group of people that tell it like it is, and those people may not actually be telling it like it is.
Love it. Corey, thoughts?
Yeah, I think anybody who says I'm telling it like it is giving an emotional response rather than an intellectual conversation piece. I think there's something that pisses them off. There's some physical, emotional reaction that they have, and they feel they need to get it out, and they don't want to be told that they're wrong. So they're just going to tell it like it is because it's my opinion. How can you tell me I'm wrong? I'm just telling it like it is. And it's like, that's not an intellectual, that's an emotional response. And to touch base a little bit on what Evan was saying about the immediacy of communication, I think that's less of a tell it like it is and more as a tell it like it needs to be. So this is a situation where I'm going to take the time later on to explain what I meant in that situation. We're going to communicate. We're going to have a conversation. You're going to understand where I'm coming from and why I did what I did. If I'm just telling it like it is, I'm just screaming at you at scene with efficiency and then never following that up. And I think that's the large difference when it comes to the communication is the follow-up and the emotional versus the intellectual response.
And Shaun, thoughts?
Yeah, I've got this sort of, I don't know, overarching feeling about the video. And just let me explain my feeling. I understand all of the content. I understand the point, the spirit of the message, though I don't necessarily agree with the how he put it across, because I feel that you can operate in those two states of you can be critical and you can be positive while telling it how it is. And I know that that phrase we can banter back and forth about its precision of making that point. But I'm gonna change the conversation flow to some degree by saying this. I think that videos like that are important because as I listened to it, I was already almost choosing a position as to the position of the video, where I was starting to think, oh, that's not me. Oh, that's him. Oh, I'm kind of like that, but not that much. Oh, I get. And so what we do is we contextualize when we're watching these kind of videos. And I think that's my overarching feeling that I'm getting is less about the message he was putting across and whether I agree with it or not. More importantly, that video is an opportunity, just like freaking bajillions of opportunities. They're in front of our nose throughout our life that we either get to look at and not pay attention to and not understand who we are in the moment and just simply throw our opinion out like it is fact, versus facing the moment and seeing what we feel, seeing what it means to us on a more deeper level rather than a knee-jerk level. And so as I was listening to him, I just felt that these videos are important for everyone to contextualize what the external world means to your internal world. And I feel, and I'm curious as to what you guys think, I feel that good communicators, which is generally the topic of today, are people who have faced enough of these video moments, enough of life's experiences that are broad enough where we've talked to almost the A to Z of humanity because either our jobs obligated to us to be in that moment or through our own curiosity, we've traveled the world to be in those moments, so that the expansiveness of communication styles, the expansiveness of humans and opinions and ideas make us somehow big enough to not like bite onto little videos like we just watched, where I'm going to choose the polarizing opinion of screw that guy. No, what I'm doing is I'm listening, I'm absorbing, and I'm curiously thinking about how his mind came to be the way it is and whether my mind should align with that or not. So I love the context of communication. Maybe when I was younger, I wanted to always be right. I don't know. Maybe that's what I was like. But that's not me now. And I think that's the other important aspect of not just contextualizing ourselves against the external world, but internally, are we still the same kid that was a goof 20, 30, 40 years ago?
These are great, like, litmus tests, right? Just to check on whether or not, am I that person? Do I do that? Am I is this the way I communicate with people when I say that? And I had this when I first actually watched that video. The first thing I thought of was the fact that I hear that a lot, that same line of, I'm just going to tell it like it is, from people from our professions, right? Military, police, fire, EMS, people that have to communicate clearly to the point right now. And I think it bleeds into the way we communicate outside of those realms, or at least it can. And I asked myself, am I less open with my praise in those moments? Like, am I uh, actively always seeking the negative? How do we fix this thing? How do we make this better? How do I engage this thing without actually engaging the praise side of it? And I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. Evan, what do you think?
Yeah, throughout this entire conversation that we're having about how to communicate, I've definitely, I've caught myself checking myself many times already, even, right? And thinking about the opinions of others, and being like, you know what, I've got a little less gray in my beard than Shaun does over here, and I can probably learn something from the guy today. I like I said, I fail at communicating. I do. If not daily, I do. I catch myself having conversations that go not the way I thought they would, or they go poorly. And I think the biggest piece of everything we're talking about today is trying to again listen to understand, and maybe look at something from a different point of view. People in our professions have a really hard time turning the switch off. Not everybody, but there are a lot of folks in our professions that have a hard time turning that switch off, right? And I agree with you, Shaun. I would say it's from my perspective, and maybe that's because I'm inundated in that lifestyle, but being a military veteran and in emergency response now, I definitely see a lot of my coworkers, my peers, my leaders running into that situation. They try and use their skills in communicating that they learn as a product of their job or the environment they spend a lot of time in every situation they find themselves in life, right? And they have a hard time, including myself, of pulling yourself out of that opinion and that mindset that you're in when the conversation starts, and just being open and thinking about the things that maybe you can learn from the conversation, even if it's just learning about yourself and catching yourself automatically formulating your response in the middle of a conversation before you've listened to the whole thing, or automatically deciding positive or negative on something. Like, positive and negative is a choice. That's a choice. That's something that we impart on something. Information is just information. It's all about your experiences in life, and whether or not you're going to say in your head at the game at that time whether this is something negative or this is something positive, right?
A beautiful point. Love that. Corey, you got any thoughts on this?
Oh, I've got so many here. Just trying to keep track of everything here. The question that I'd ask is, when was the last time that somebody had an opinion, they were expressing it to you, and you communicated with them without expressing your opinion back? So how often did you explore their opinion? What were their thoughts on that? How did they come to that opinion? Without thinking you needed to provide your counterpoint or an agreeing point. Because really, honestly, is that part of the conversation at that point? They have something that they want to talk to you about. It's what they want to talk to you about. Just a thought, because I always think, oh, well, I have an opinion on that. I have an opinion on that. I can't wait until they're done. I'm going to provide them my opinion. And to your point a little bit earlier, which was, am I the same, foolish kid? No. But one of the things that I've found is that most of my failures in communication is when I've tried to communicate with somebody. So I throw more words at something and more words at something. And I found that as I've gotten older and more experienced, it's not the things that I say, it's the things that I don't say that are more effective. Because when I'm communicating with somebody, I really want them to think about what I'm saying. So if I have this verbal diarrhea where I'm just constantly talking, trying to hammer home points, it never gives them a chance to absorb it. It never gives them a chance to think about it. It never gives them a chance to decide whether or not that's something that they want to consider, because there's no time. They're still busy listening to what I'm saying and trying to keep points in their head that they want to respond to. Very clear instance of this is when it comes to not trying to just simply respond to somebody and saying less, is think about somebody that you truly care about in your life, somebody that you love that's having a very hard day. Do we walk up and say, I hear you're having a hard day? They explain it and you go, this is what I want. This is what I want you to do. This is how I'm going to solve it. Or, and I'll ask your wives this, is it more effective if you just look at them and go, hug them, and say, I got you. What's going to be more effective?
Yep, I've run into that many times. I can tell you I've done the wrong thing many times. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
Well, that's very much the theme of what we're talking about right now over just the last couple of minutes. And Evan started it off by correctly, in my opinion, stating that we can all improve in communication. And I think that's an important realization. As I was listening to Evan, I thought, man, this guy's got it together. He understands how to communicate. He understands his internal world, his external world. He's got a good sense of this topic. And so there you go. I'm throwing out a compliment. And that wasn't a planned compliment. That's just an authentic, organic unfolding of the conversation. Now, let me take that and play with it a little bit, because I'm not known for compliments. I'm not known for all the pats on the back. In fact, I give them out rarely. And so I like that. I like it because I understand it as a communication tool. When I throw out an attaboy to someone, and this is not in reference to Evan now, this is to anyone. If I throw out an attaboy, it counts, because it hasn't been so diluted due to me overly focusing on patting everyone on the back every single moment that something happens. I cherry pick my moments and I randomize my moments. Somebody can do something magnificent, and it's not that I will ignore it. It's just that I won't have a big fireworks moment with them. And then they'll do something much smaller in context of the magnificence that they accomplished several days ago or weeks ago or months ago. And I'll give them a frickin' nod, good job. And I'll move right along. And that good job, a couple of words, is the equivalent of fireworks if you're not a fireworks guy. And so you got to know yourself, and you got to know how to use your patterns, your routines, what the external world understands of you. If I'm known as a guy who doesn't give attaboys every single second of the day, then I have to be aware of that, and I have to use it carefully or wisely or intelligently or craftily to create outcomes that are good for that person, good for me, good for the world. That's how we're supposed to wield our power. If you don't know what your powers are, you're not wielding anything. And me knowing me, I know how to play my external game so that I can create more force multiplication through the correct application of choice words at choice moments. And so there is no simple algorithm on how to communicate well for everyone. We're all very unique. It is all very much a boutique approach in the moment with whoever you're communicating with. And that's why digital communication is so difficult. Because when you've got the person 3D in front of you, when you're shaking their hand, that handshake is half a novel. It's a half a day's worth of talk, sometimes, that shake. But you can't get that across in a digital way. So I believe that in a digital space, as well as in a three-dimensional space, we have to be aware of the tools that we've got, our patterns, what people recognize in us, and we have to play intelligently with that energy.
This is it's a fantastic point. I was teaching jiu-jitsu this morning, and that's what we were doing. We were playing on the mats. We were learning how to communicate physically with one another in a playful manner. We weren't trying to dominate or retreat or anything. It was just engagement through a playful manner. I think this is a fantastic point. And we're running a little short on time here, but I wanted to ask a final question on this, was the fact that it seems like everything that we've talked about comes back to, intentionality, being intentional in wanting to be a better communicator. Because to your guys' point earlier, where you're saying that, am I still the same stupid kid I was 20 years ago? I know people that are still the same stupid kid they were 20 years ago, right? And I'm sure you guys all know people that are like that too. I guess maybe what was the tipping point for you where you went, I need to be a better communicator every single day? Where was the point that you said, I can't keep doing this? What do you guys think? Corey, I'm going to hit you first.
I think probably the point was about halfway through my career when I realized I spent more time, like I said, trying to convince people of what I was trying to say than just simply saying it and having it heard. And it realized that it really was entirely to do with me and not the people I was communicating with, because I was communicating with several different people. And when I started to adjust the way that I did things, and again, everything that we've talked about on this podcast, people started being receptive, and in all walks of my life. And I thought, yeah, I was the problem. I was communicating badly. It wasn't everybody else receiving it badly. It was the way I was communicating it. I think that's probably where the biggest aha moment came from for me.
Love it. Evan, what are you thinking?
Yeah, you get the wheels turning on that one, Chance. I hope others can learn faster than I did, to be honest. I want to say that where I can tangibly reach out and touch some time in my life where I can, I've got those painful moments in my mind of communicating poorly that caused me to realize that it's time to change, was probably when I first got into my first leadership position in an organization. And I realized, like Shaun was touching on, that your words matter. How you wield those words matter. People are paying attention to what you say, what you do, how you carry yourself, that energy you give off. And at the time, I was in a position where I was looking after folks that were geographically spaced out and didn't have a lot of face time with them every day. So I had to make those moments count when you did get face time with individuals, and I failed at that. I made some mistakes. I wasn't careful with my words. I was listening to respond, not to understand when they had ideas and when they had a point to get across to me, or just information they wanted me to know. As a leader, I find that one of the biggest principles of leadership, I should say, that resonates with me is representing your opponent's concerns and presiding in their interests. Right? You can't do that if you don't know them, if you can't communicate, if you can't listen to them, if you don't know what their challenges are. And I had some hurtful moments there as a leader where I got course corrected, as Shaun would put it, and I had to find a better way to communicate, and just realize that the term being a student of your craft, communication is a human craft, a fundamental human craft, and it's something you're always learning, and you need to be self-aware in those teaching moments and actually make use of them.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Shaun, any thoughts on this?
Yes, much like Evan, I've made more mistakes than Evan, probably because I'm older, and I continue to make mistakes. And my conversation skills improve, but they're never good enough. The imposter syndrome in me obligates me to get better at everything that I do. And so the idea of me being a good communicator as a leader, in my first career, we'll say, I was considered pretty good at communicating. I was considered to be a pretty good leader. That's what I'm told. But when I look back at that, it's almost a shameful moment for me compared to what I know now. How I could have been a better leader back then versus what I'm capable of now. But I think the main point I'm going to make is this, and I think all of us on the panel understand this. Throughout our lives, we have phases. The domains that we're operating in, whether it's one-on-one when we're young bucks trying to solve the world's problems, or whether it's later in life where you're trying to be helpful in some way through a digital space like we are right now, they all have to start off as new domains. I'd never podcasted, and now I'm 1,000+ podcasts or live chat podcasts. When I first started, I sucked at communicating. Sucked. It took me several hundred podcasts to actually kind of get my act together. And I want to say that today I feel like I'm doing okay, but I need to do better. That is my compulsion, my relentless pursuit of excellence, to communicate better, to do everything better. And so I don't think, as I look back, there's ever been a time when I've like, yes, nailed that TEDx moment. I may never feel that in my life, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the unsatisfied feeling of wanting more from myself in the moment. And so, no matter how many mistakes we've all made in the past, I take, like, I guess, satisfaction in knowing that, as it states above, as long as we're frickin' doing our best, boys, that's the only thing you can do. Communicate as well as you can in the moment. And later today, when we all look back on this podcast and think, oh, I wish I hadn't have said that, I'll have faith that I was doing my best, just like I am right now. Just freaking doing our best in the conversation at hand should be enough.
And I think on top of that, it's something that I want to remind everybody before we do our final thoughts here, is the fact that it starts with communicating poorly. If you want to become a better communicator, you're going to have bad communications. And then you're going to slowly work on it. And you're slowly going to build that. And it's going to turn into, I mean, the best communicators in the world right now. People that can hold podcasts for 4 or 5 hours, or have philosophical discussions, or any of the things that are happening out there in the world right now. They started as some dumb kid who couldn't communicate. They eventually got to a point where they are. So I think that is a point that I just wanted to touch on before we shut it down. Now, we are a little bit over an hour. I'm going to have to postpone my third video, which was really good because the conversation has been awesome. So thank you guys. This has been wicked. Evan, Corey, Shaun, loved it. This was awesome. Any final thoughts? Anything still bubbling in the back of your brain about the way we communicate? Corey, what do you got?
Just remember, you're a book. Everyone around you is a book. All your experiences, thoughts, feelings, observations are there. If you write it in a way that nobody can read and nobody can see properly the vision that you have, then it's useless. It doesn't matter what's written in there if it's poorly communicated and unable to be read.
Bam. Evan, thoughts? Final thoughts?
Yeah, true open communication is expressing your half-formed thoughts and trying to put them in acceptable words. So if I could steal, somebody else's quote, I would say, fail and fail often. Just make sure you're doing your best and you're learning from those mistakes.
Bam. Love it. Shaun, final thoughts?
Yeah, it's something that Corey said that is just firing off in my prefrontal cortex right now. And that is, we are all complex organisms. Each one of us, we're complex individuals. Every human is complex and unique and sometimes hard to understand. And because of our complexity and the other person's complexity in front of us, if you're not a good communicator, then that complexity can create a lot of friction or tension or issues. Tension is good. Friction is good. Hang out in that moment and figure it out. Become better at complexity. My second thought is this: because we are all complex and not everyone sees it for what it is, it's our jobs to symbolize who we are, to get better at representing ourselves through action, through standing, through energy projection, without a frickin' word, without saying a sentence, without overly complicating the already complex. Get better at symbolizing yourself through action.
I like it. I only have one point to add on that, and I think is simplicity. If you are having trouble dealing with the complexity of life, simplify it. You want to communicate with somebody, be clear and concise, ask questions, things like that, but keep it simple, and that way you can build upon it for the next time, and then you can build upon that and build upon that, and so on and so on and so on. Again, thank you guys for the conversation. This has been fantastic. And I'll finish this off with the same way. Oh, I screwed it up. I'm just going to kill it right here. Thanks, everybody. Continue to learn, build, and grow. We'll see y'all next week. Chimo.